Welcome back to the Wolf of Property and Casualty. I'm your host, Derek Lasniak, with over 15 years of commercial broking experience focused on the middle market, upper middle market, national account space. The Wolf of Property and Casualty is a practitioner-led podcast designed for brokers, buyers, and insurance carriers. No bullshit. Each and every episode, one day at a time. Today's podcast stems from a conversation that I was having with a former customer from my old life. Most of my old customers only think about me from an insurance professional, and hopefully maybe that overshadows some of the poor decisions I've made over the last couple of years. This is a company that's has some operations out of state, out of my home state of Wisconsin. I always ask them, how's the people business, right? Because in my line of work, it was always not just about financials. It has been for as long as I practice. Can you find enough help to do whatever you need to do? And that led us down a journey to talking about the use of staffing companies. And they clearly had a question, and I'm always open to insurance problems. And so we started talking about the use of staffing companies, and specifically because this is an out of state or operation that's out of the state of Wisconsin. We started talking about the contractual relationship and the liability relationship between a staffing company and their operation. And what this conversation eventually led to was a reminder for me, and it's something that I didn't probably do perfectly throughout my time, but an endorsement that everybody who uses staffing should probably get a refresher on. And what I'm talking about is the alternate employer endorsement. So we'll talk a little bit about what the alternate employer endorsement is, but there's really two endorsements. And the first one I think everybody gets when they're working with the staffing company. So let me kind of just lay this out there. This is situation specific. But let's just say you're ABC Manufacturing and you need temp help for a seasonal increase or to fill some gaps that you can't hire full-time help. Every customer of mine in my old life definitely was using multiple relationships with staffing companies to plug temporary gaps or to help feed in new employees. And typically, most of these staffing companies or PEOs, they're going to have a master work comp policy that they put all of the employees that they're leasing to ABC Manufacturing are going to be on a master policy. We could do another episode about what those policies. The staffing company is going to be covering the work comp, meaning they are putting the payroll on their policy, even though the employee is reporting to work at ABC Manufacturing, because that employee is going to be an employee of the staffing company, not of ABC Manufacturing. And so I'm leasing them. And these relationships always have a contract. And within these contracts, I've looked at a lot of them over my years, and it spells out the staffing company will provide work comp. And it reminded me that, yes, the staffing company is going to provide the work comp. It's not the responsibility of ABC Manufacturing. It's the other things you need for ABC Manufacturing. What do they need to protect themselves from an injury from this leased employee? The first thing is, and I think this is obvious, and I think this is the one that always gets talked about, and that one is called a waiver of subrogation. ABC Manufacturing asks for a waiver of subrogation from the staffing company in favor of ABC Manufacturing. That specifically says, look, if Joe from the staffing company gets hurt while he's performing work at ABC Manufacturing, and the staffing company insurance carrier, let's say Travelers, pays out all those benefits for medical and indemnity because they've agreed to insure the injured employee, we have waived the right of Travelers to subrogate against ABC Manufacturing. That means that if Travelers gets suspicious that Joe maybe wasn't hurt because of his own negligence, but because of a condition set forth by ABC Manufacturing that they had negligence, let's say that they took the safety off the machine, for example, Travelers reserves the right to traditionally, without an endorsement, subrogate to ABC Manufacturing for the liability for the injury and the damage caused to Joe. A waiver of subrogation in favor of ABC Manufacturing will then take away Travelers' right. It eliminates the right of Travelers under any circumstance to come back after ABC Manufacturing. That's point number one. I'm pretty sure that over my career, I batted 100% with that one. I think any good insurance professional has a waiver of subrogation in favor of them from their staffing company. The one that I think I failed to put into force routinely, and the one that I want to call into light today, is the alternate employer endorsement. I had experience with this endorsement for really exotic types of situations where like one of my manufacturing clients was borrowing workers to another manufacturing client. But as I was talking it through with this former customer of mine, I realized, especially since this is out of the state of Wisconsin, Wisconsin has a very strong work comp background. Wisconsin was the first state to administer and invent workers' compensation insurance. And the ability for an injured worker under any circumstance in the state of Wisconsin, all you listeners who aren't from here, uh, the ability for an injured worker to litigate for liability and damages outside of what work comp normally provides, medical indemnity under statute, is very limited. It's really hard to sue your employer for an injury in the state of Wisconsin. Unlike states like California, where I think I used to joke, I think most injured workers, before they go to the ER, they probably stop at their attorney's office. In the state of Wisconsin, that's very difficult. And therefore, this endorsement maybe isn't getting talked about enough in Wisconsin in traditional staffing arrangements. But at any rate, almost every manufacturing, even construction companies are using staffing arrangements. And if you're outside of Wisconsin, even if you're in, you should be checking this box with the same regularity as you do for waiver of subrogation. And the reason is, and I emphasized this when I was talking about the waiver of subrogation, that insulates ABC manufacturing from travelers, the insurance carrier, coming back and trying to recoup subrogation, recoup the costs that they spent on that injured worker. That's only protecting you from travelers, the staffing company's insurance carrier. The alternate employer endorsement is an extra layer of protection for ABC manufacturing. Let me lay out this scenario. So Joe gets hurt at ABC manufacturing while being employed and on the work comp of the staffing company. Travelers then is able to pay the work comp benefits and indemnity. We have a waiver of subrogation in place. So ABC manufacturing is protected from travelers subrogating. However, Joe, or maybe Joe's family, if Joe died because the injury was really bad, Joe still has his right to litigate against ABC manufacturing. He can file a lawsuit. Again, I mentioned in the state of Wisconsin, that's really hard to do. There's not a lot of precedent for that. But in almost every other state, and if the negligence is egregious enough, like I said, you took the safety off the machine, those lawsuits still can happen. We haven't done anything with that waiver of subrogation to insulate Joe from litigating against the employer's liability section of ABC manufacturing or the general liability. And a general liability policy at ABC manufacturing is 9 times out of 10 going to exclude employment, related injuries. And my point being is that to insulate ABC manufacturing from Joe's lawsuit or descendants of Joe's lawsuit, the alternate employer endorsement is a simple endorsement that goes on the staffing company's policy, and it extends their coverage to ABC manufacturing, not in a named insured, not in an additional insured status, just as an alternate employer, extending Part 1 and Part 2 of the work comp provisions in the event that Joe were to litigate. So Part 1 is medical benefits and the indemnity. Part 2, though, is the employer's liability, the liability component. So now you have that liability insulation for ABC manufacturing via the staffing company's policy. These endorsements are really easy. There's an accord form. Every carrier has it. The endorsement is going to dictate that it needs the name of ABC manufacturing, the contract in which the relationship exists, and maybe a description of operations, meaning Joe can't go to ABC manufacturing to do CNC machining and then be cooking meth in the basement. After I had this conversation with my old customers, I realized you should be doing this no matter what state you're in, and I probably didn't bat close to 100% like I did. I always had a waiver of subrogation asked. I always had a template of what you get from your staffing company, but I'm not so sure I was really good about the alternate employer endorsement. Admittedly, I wasn't great at this. And so it's another example of a relationship for you brokers out there. It's really common. Buyers, you know this, absolutely. You always have staffing companies. Labor is a problem. The unemployment rate's under 4%. Labor is always a problem. So these relationships are common. Temporary help, seasonal help is always going to be taking place. Set up these contracts once. Set them up correctly. Make sure you have that waiver, but also make sure you get this alternate employer endorsement to not only insulate you from subrogation of the insurance carrier, but also from the individual employee who reserves right for litigation under the policy.